Hi, everyone. It's me, Eartha. Welcome to Transition Awareness Breathing Podcast. Today, I would like to share a different way of how I teach mindfulness, particularly to children. And so I hope you can use what we are going to go over today to reinforce and help you and your family practice mindfulness. Oftentimes, when we learn mindfulness, and this is all research based, that we learn mindfulness, but we don't really practice it. So we may go through a 4-week course, an 8-week course, and it's all great information, makes sense. And life gets busy again. And, we forget to pull those tools out the toolbox. And that's pretty normal. It's good to have a routine time to practice. One of the things that I talked about a couple of podcasts ago was having a routine is like having a building block for success. And when we talk about routines, we also have to build in that routine some flexibility because life changes. I mean, we are transitioning all the time. And if we're so strict with a routine when change happens, oftentimes it causes stress. So I would recommend that in our schedule to build in some flexibility. But when we're first beginning of setting our routines and building those building blocks, it's very important to have some structure. Having structure and a schedule, it helps, especially children or anyone whose attention span is still growing. Or if you're new to a position and new to a job, maybe you got promoted, you're a manager, or you got a whole different a lateral transfer, a whole new responsibility. Learning that routine is so important for your success. And once you learn the routine, then as you grow in your new position, you find that you can add your style to the routine. You can show your gifts and your strengths. But when you're starting off, you're following a routine. Everybody takes a different amount of time in learning the routine. So there's really no right and wrong. And so I would invite you to not to judge yourself and not to pressure yourself in thinking, this is taking too long. I'm not going to get this. That negative self-talk just squeezes its way in there. It squeezes its way with me too. And, I just have to say, okay, I'm going to try again. Like this recording. I have to try again. I want to make it better. And so I learn from my mistakes. And when we learn from our mistakes, when we have that growth mindset, frame of mind, that growth mindset principle, you'll find that you can pull all kinds of creative things from yourself. So part of the rest of this podcast, I'm going to tell a story. And so gather your children. If you don't have any children, I think you might enjoy the story as well, or you can share it with anyone. And what I've done is a different teaching style. And I invite you to also Be flexible. Okay, so here we go. And I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, friends. I'd like to tell you a story. It's called Nutmeg's Code. Once upon a time, there was a young adventurer named Sophia. Sophia loved to explore the woods and discover new things. One day, as she wandered through the forest, she met a mischievous, funny little squirrel. Sophia named it Nutmeg because its bushy, fluffy fur reminded her of the color of the spice nutmeg. Nutmeg seemed to always get into trouble with its other squirrel friends. Nutmeg noticed Sophia and loved to distract her. As Sophia was out exploring, and she gradually learned how to notice Nutmeg without letting him take over her focus. In a few minutes, Nutmeg thought that he would try a little harder to distract Sophia. Sophia noticed Nutmeg getting closer and closer and doing all kinds of distracting noises and chirps. Sophia said, "Hello, Nutmeg." "Not now." And she continued on her adventure. She said, "I'll see you later, Nutmeg. I'm going to continue on my adventure." And Nutmeg went and played in the trees. One day, Nutmeg saw Sophia, and Sophia was walking to school. So he decided to follow Sophia to school. He scampered up the tree outside her classroom window and peered in, chattering and excited. As Sophia tried to pay attention to her lesson, she looked at Nutmeg and whispered, "Not now, not now." Sophia's teacher, Mrs. Oakwood, saw Nutmeg and smiled. Then she said in a perky voice, "Class, I would like everyone to take their books off their desk and let's get ready for our quiz today." Mrs. Oakwood walked towards Sophia and said, "Well, Sophia, it looks like you have a little friend out there." Sophia giggled and nodded. "His name is Sophia, not, his name is Nutmeg," Sophia said in a small, soft voice. Mrs. Oakwood did not pay any attention to Nutmeg and let Nutmeg stay, knowing that he wasn't disturbing anyone. Nutmeg watched with interest as Sophia and her classmates learned about science and ecology. When it was time for recess, Mrs. Oakwood told the children to get in line order. Before the children left the classroom for recess, Mrs. Oakwood asked Sophia, "What did you whisper to Nutmeg before you started your quiz?" Sophia was surprised that Mrs. Oakwood noticed she had whispered to Nutmeg. Suddenly, Sophia became so nervous that her voice began to quiver. She gathered her strength and took a big breath in her nose and blew it out through her mouth. She could smell the playground smells. Sophia felt pressured. She didn't want to cause her class to be late for recess. She took another deep breath in and blew it out. Then Sophia looked at Mrs. Oakwood's warm brown eyes through her big polka-dotted glasses and said, I reminded Nutmeg about the unique mindfulness code. Mrs. Oakwood's face looked puzzled, and she said, What code is that? Sophia thought Mrs. Oakwood's voice sounded friendly, yet very inquisitive. Then, most of Sophia's classmates wanted to know what the special code was, too. Hey, Sophia, what's the unique code? We want to know, too. The classroom chatter began to rumble in the class, and the voices grew louder. Mrs. Oakwood reminded the children, please lower your volume of your voices so that we can all hear the unique code that Sophia shared with Nutmeg. After a few moments, Sophia said, I told Nutmeg not now. She said she had learned the unique mindfulness code several years ago, and it helps her not to pay attention to things that's distracting her from doing her work that she's working on right now. Mrs. Oakwood said with excitement, I love the mindfulness code. Do you mind if I use it in our class? Maybe we can practice not now in class. I don't mind, said Sophia with a sparkle in her voice. She had a good feeling inside. Hey, guys, Tiffany shouted from the back of the line. Let's make a new game for recess. Let's call it the Not Now game. Tiffany was a great friend. She always knew how to make up the best games during recess. When Sophia and her class reached the playground, Nutmeg, her special friend, scampered down from the tree and joined Sophia on the playground. Together, they played tag and climbed the jungle gym, and Nutmeg climbed the trees mostly. Nutmeg was so flexible and agile. He would dash in between the trees and between the children. Mrs. Oakwood smiled as she looked at the children playing and thought, it looks like we have a class mascot. I hope you liked this little story. Did you pay attention to the different ways Sophia used some of her five senses and how she paid attention to her feelings? Even when she was nervous, she chose to practice a mindfulness skill. She remained calm in the face of her fears and nervousness. Sophia used her superpower breath. It's like a gem of calmness. And did you pay attention to the time when Sophia waited a moment? It may have seemed like an hour, but it was just maybe a moment to give her a chance to get her thoughts together and her words together. Here's a few helpful tips to help you remember what we've reviewed so far. Focus on your breath as an anchor and focus on what's going on right now. The breath is always happening right now. Even as I'm talking to you, I'm focusing on my breath and making sure I'm not breathing too fast. I'm not talking too fast. And I hope this is clear for you because I want you to share that special gift that I'm passing on to you. I want you to share it with your friends and family. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment. And also, it serves as a constant and easy point to focus. It helps us to develop a non reactive response to our anxieties or to our fears. It helps us to become aware of our thoughts and our emotions. Mindfulness can also have a calming effect on our nervous system. Did you know that deep, slow breaths activates a part of our body called the parasympathetic nervous system? I know that's a long word and it might sound kind of strange. The parasympathetic nervous system helps us and promotes relaxation and reduces stress. Maybe you can find ways to practice your superpower breath and get that gem of calmness too. This is one way that we can review what we have learned about mindfulness through telling a story. And it makes it real for us. And it also helps create and develop our creativity. Did you find the different clues of the mindfulness points in the story? What did nutmeg represent when we talk about mindfulness? Talk to your friends. And what did Sophia represent? What kind of skills does she represent? Did you see yourself a little bit like Sophia? Do you have a friend in your class that makes up great games? And how about Mrs. Oakwood? She was the teacher, so she had a leadership position and she had a friendly voice. She was not judgmental. She was curious because she wanted to know the special codes too. And how about Sophia? She had to be brave. She had to gather her strength, stay calm, and share what she had learned about mindfulness to a grown up. Do you think you can share what you've learned here today to the grown ups in your life? Well, just think about it. Did you figure out what nutmeg was? Nutmeg was the distractor. And the important point is when we have distractors, we acknowledge the distractor, just like Sophia did. She acknowledged the distractor and she said, not now. Is someone distracting you right now? Now, when you say the special code, not now, you don't have to scream it and you don't have to say it really rough. You say it in the voice of calmness. Calmness can be contagious. So can fear. So you want to be a leader and say not now with calmness. Look to your right and say to the person sitting next to you, if they're distracting you, say not now. Or maybe that person's on your left. Say in a calm voice, look at them and say not now. But that way, it doesn't sound mean. It's calm. And then you continue to do what you are doing. That's a special code. I hope you use it often. And what you'll find is that your attention span, I like to call it your attention muscle, although your attention is not really a muscle, but it's part of growing. Our attention and our organizational skills grows as we mature. Most of the time, I get distracted too. I also have to practice not now. Otherwise, I wouldn't get anything done. So what part of the brain does all this organization and helping us keep things in order? Well, it's called the executive function. That's what it's called. And it's in the frontal part of the brain. Let me show you something. Not only do I use story time when I teach, sometimes I use different objects, training aids. Okay, so this is a toy. It's not a real brain. It's a squishy. See? See? You can see where it was made. There you go. Anyway, back on track, guys. Not now, Eartha. Okay, so this is a brain, a toy of brain. And so this is the back. This is trying to show the back part of the brain here and the front part of the brain here. And so our executive functioning skills, our organizational skills, it develops in the frontal part of our brain. And when we're little, and even when we become a teenager, we're still developing that front part of our brain. And so sometimes when we are in class and we do something that's what we call impulsive. Impulsive is, sometimes you might think about doing something and maybe it's not really the time or the place to do something, but all of a sudden you find you did it anyway, or you said something and you didn't realize, oops, it's too late, it's out, I've done it. Okay, so that was a little bit of impulsivity. And it wasn't done because of malice or because you wanted to be mean, or it was just not thinking. Have you ever heard anyone say, what were you thinking? You weren't thinking. Well, that comes from that frontal part of the brain that we have to train and say, not now. Not now. Just wait. Sign language for wait. Okay, so we covered a story about nutmeg. We found out what the special clues were, and we also learned the part of the brain which helps us get stronger in our executive functioning, organizational skills, calming ourselves down, holding back from doing things that's impulsive. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I look forward to talking to you again next time. Bye.